You are now tuned into Virtually I'm Possible presents Lazy Learning Land podcast, where we teach teachers how to be lazier yet more effective to increase student performance but decrease teacher burnout and stress. I'm S. Your hostess that always gives you the mostest while doing the least, also known as the queen of working and not working. With over 15 years of experience working at the hood schools, and I absolutely love it. I'm here to share with you the tricks of the trade that I've developed over the years that will make your life as a teacher so much easier and even help you fall back in love with the profession again. Today's episode is sponsored by the Lazy Learning Land podcast, where we skip all the fluff and give you the real deal applicable stuff. You can listen to episodes on Apple Podcast, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon and Samsung Music, and of course, on the Podbean app. Now, for today's episode. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Lazy Learning Land podcast. Today's podcast episode is dedicated to talking about the first week of school for teachers and starting the way you want to end. I promise you by this episode, you guys are going to be so inspired and just ready to go ahead and plan out that first week. You're going to know what your goals are. You're going to know what you want to train your students to do because you are going to set them up for the rest of the school year. So let's get into it. Now, we all know the first week of school, it is like a really rare occasion for any teacher to feel 100% ready when the first day of school comes. The biggest mistake I feel that teachers make during the first week of school is they put all this time and energy into icebreakers, getting to know their students' activities, kumbaya, all this stuff, right? Or even worse, they spend majority of their time deciding that they are going to dive directly into content. I mean, people are doing full-blown lessons the first week of school that are on grade level. To me, that is so cray-cray, but we'll get into why I feel that way in a moment. Now, to me, the only content that you should be concerned with is the content, the task that you are going to expect your student and how you're going to expect your students to carry those tasks out. So what tasks are they going to be doing throughout the year? And what are the expectations that go along with it? That is the only content in my book that you should be teaching. So to me, what really should be taking place the first week of school is modeling any routines and activities you plan to do at any point during your school year, as well as modeling, saying, writing, repeating, all the expectations that go along with those different activities. So I'm glad you guys are still with me. We are going to work on how to start the way you want to finish. So this is going to be a combination of my experiences, plus asking you to kind of plug in your thoughts and your experiences, because by the time this episode is over, I promise you, you are going to feel so inspired and so ready to plan out that first week because you're going to know exactly what you want to accomplish. So let's take a moment. I want you to sit and visualize. If your classroom was the perfect classroom, if it was running the most perfect way possible, what would your classroom look like? What would it sound like? And how would you like for your classroom to run? What is the fluidity? How are things going from task to task? And I want you to write these things down. So if you need to pause the podcast and write these things down, really take a moment before you move forward, because I promise you having that information as we go through the next things is really going to help. But in case you're kind of still trying to figure it out, is there a specific theme you want your classroom to look like? Are your students sitting in rows or are they in groups? Do you have alternative seating or cool down zones? What are your students saying? Are your students collaborating or are they working individually? Are they teaching each other? Are your students making presentations? Are you in control of everything, or are the students more independent, more hands-on, and helping the classroom run by completing various tasks, including teaching. So I'm going to chime in with some of my goals that I tend to have for each year in my secondary math class. Now, I did say a math class, but again, a lot of the stuff can truly be tailored to any subject area, especially as long as it's in the secondary. But even for those of you in primary, this exercise is still very beneficial, even though your day-to-day may look a little bit different. So my 5 goals. So the first one is I'll need a silent first 5 minutes of class, which is usually their bell work time. The second one is I need adherence to my golden rules. The third thing, I have a goal of wanting a collaborative culture. My fourth thing is I absolutely love rotations and stations. And the fifth thing is I want to create a risk-free learning environment that is just highly involved with the growth mindset. And once I know my goals, I then strategically plan out how to fit them into my first week. And certain goals have to be modeled on a daily basis that first week of school. So once you know what your goals are, you have to implement them starting that first week, essentially because they are going to be daily practices and requirements for my class or for your class throughout the entire school year. So now we're going to get into, now that you know your goals, how can you start to implement your goals in the first week so that you can have a smoother sailing rest of the school year? Okay, so my first goal is a silent first 5 minutes of class, especially during the bell work time. So my vision for this, how I vision this happening in my perfect classroom is I need to steal a few moments to take attendance, respond to emails, answer phone calls. And as soon as students enter my classroom, I need them to read the smartboard and begin working on whatever their bell work assignment is. While they are working, I also need my students to be working quietly and independently. And I would like for my students to use their notes if the bell work is actually content related. So the implementation. Now that I know what I want to see throughout the year, how can I start implementing that the first week of school to make it happen? And the key to that is the students must know that the smartboard is their go-to upon entry. And in order to foster that culture, the very first day of school, I have bell work posted for them. So as they're coming into the classroom and I'm greeting them, I'm saying, hey, take a seat, get out your supplies, go ahead and read the smartboard and start working on the task that's on the smartboard. So from day one, from the jump, they are working off of that smartboard. And sometimes for that first day, first week stuff, I have them fill out an information card, like their name, their birthday, sports activities, favorite color, just little information cards. Some people may have those like information sheets, but either way, it's just something that they know that they are to do when they come in. Other times I just have them write on a specific topic. Yes, it's a math class, but I do have my students write. But regardless of what it is, my students just need to know that there is something for them to do, and how they figure out that there's something to do is by reading it off that smartboard. The type of bell work I give varies the first week of school. I try to mix it up. I include the different variations of bell work that they're going to see kind of throughout the school year. So I never keep it exactly one thing. So I may start off with the first day with the index card. Then I may include some math problems that they should have been able to solve from 2 or 3 math classes earlier in their education. It may be a digital task like filling out a Google form or getting set up with specific materials for the activity for the day, just a list of materials to get out, labeling their piece of paper a certain way, something, but either way, just to know that they have instructions. And I also lay out the expectation that during the first 5 minutes of class, during that bell work time, it is to be done quietly and independently. I let them know that from day one. And as a matter of fact, I repeat that every single day at the beginning of every single class period, because I want to make sure that they know that I mean business with that. And I even tell them that whispering still counts as talking, even if they need to borrow something to write on or to write with from a classmate, that there's some universal gestures for pen, pencil, paper. No, I need them to use those universal gestures during my first 5 minutes. Now, the key to me implementing this, or you implementing something similar, is to continue this daily for the first week of school. And well, honestly, you're going to continue it daily for the entire year. Even if your bell work sometimes is take out a piece of paper, take out a piece of pencil, label the paper this, and sit quietly until I start the class. That's still bell work. And they should still be expected to do that quietly and independently. So just every day, always have something for them to do, whether it's academically based, whether it's setting up for the day based, writing based, whatever the case may be, but just make sure that you keep that consistent, because if that's your expectation for the entire year, you really want to set that tone the first week. All right. So now my second goal is adherence to my classroom golden rules. So the vision. I like to say I run a pretty tight ship. I mean, yes, I work in the hood, but I write less than 5 discipline referrals every single school year. My students, they self-correct, or their classmates assist in redirecting each other. When I get new students, they seamlessly fall in line with the classroom culture that's already established. Now, how do I go from that vision to actually implementing it, to making it happen in real life? Well, prior to the first week of school, I post my numbered, all my golden rules have numbers on them. Okay. They're numbered. I post my numbered golden rules at the front of the class, above my smart board, above my whiteboards. It's at the front, honey, where their eyes usually are the majority of the day or the class period. And after bell work the first day, I go over my golden rules. But I don't just go over those golden rules the first day. I go over them explicitly like the first 3 days. And then I go over them explicitly the first day of the second week of school. Cause we get that revolving door, students, the guidance counselors making schedule changes, but I make sure that I go over those. And if you would like to know more about how posting your classroom basics or your golden rules is a game changer, you have to absolutely check out my post on avoid looking like a fool and post your golden rules. Well, post your classroom rules. But anyways, so my top rules that seem to save me a great deal of headache. Now, I do have 11 golden rules. I'm going to share with you my top golden rules that do save me a lot of headache during the year because I have them posted. Game changers. My tardy policy. What does being tardy look like? Or what does being on time to my class look like? And what's the expectation for my students when they are tardy? My limited restroom passes and my no-go parts of the period. So I limit my restroom passes to 2 passes per 9 weeks. That's me. Some teachers do 3. Cool. Good for you. But I also have no-go parts of the period where I tell my students, hey, I'm not letting you go to the restroom if up at the board teaching a lesson or addressing the entire class. That's not restroom time, because that's something that every student needs to hear, including you. I post the personal electronics policy, the school policy, the county policy, my classroom policy, the food and drink policy, whether they're allowed to eat or drink or have gum or candy, etc. All that is posted. And the growth mindset and effort policy is also one of my golden rules that I have posted. But the key, how do I get my students to self-correct? How do I get my students to correct others? How do I write less than 5 referrals per school year? And referencing your posted golden rules daily the first week of school is really, really important. And even touching on them again during the second week is important. And hitting them again after you've come back from a break. If we had a 3-day weekend, or if we just came back from the Thanksgiving holiday, the winter break, spring break, I go back over those jokers again. But whenever I'm going over those golden rules the first week, I make my redirection of students general. So I don't call specific people out and quote unquote shame them about not following my rule, I make it very general. I give general reminders as I see my students out of compliance, allowing them that window of opportunity to check themselves. I reference the rule number and I point to it as I give the redirection. So I say, hey, I see a few of you guys are not following rule number 4. So just go ahead and take a look up here. Remind yourself of what rule number 4 is. And if you see that you are not in compliance with that, just go ahead real quick and just kind of shift gears. But throughout the year, redirect your students with ease. Like by having your golden rules posted, it makes redirection so easy because all I have to say without missing a beat is Jenny, rule number 3. Now Jenny's going to look up at rule number 3. Jenny's going to read it. She's going to reflect on how she's breaking rule number 3, and then she's going to fix it. And I get to keep going with whatever I was doing. And whenever I get new students, I usually pick a neighboring classmate of theirs to go over the golden rules with them. So now they're kind of making a little friend, but it's reiterating what culture I have in my classroom for those students that are just joining us. All right. The next one, goal number 3, a collaborative classroom culture. Goal number 3, a collaborative classroom culture. The vision of this, okay, what this looks like in my mind is my students are working harmoniously together. My stronger students are tutoring. My not so strong students, my lower performing students are actively asking questions and getting help from their peers. Everyone in the group works together using critical thinking and problem solving skills in order to complete academic based tasks. So again, how do I move from a vision into implementation? The easiest way to foster a highly collaborative culture is to start group conversations, group activities, group games, all of that stuff during the first week. Having your students work collaboratively 2 to 3 days during the first week seems to be the sweet spot. Make note that the activities do not have to take the entire period in order to be considered collaborative. So you can mix those in and take 15 minutes and do a collaborative activity. It does not have to be the entire period, but you just want them to get accustomed to group conversations, group activities, group games, collaboration. And ideally, you kind of want to start small that first week and build yourself up because you've got those kids that have anxiety. Sometimes it's a new school. They don't know people in the class because their friends didn't get your class period, so on and so forth. So you don't want to make it extremely uncomfortable. Do start small and talk to your students about what good collaboration looks like, what good collaboration sounds like. I tend to circulate the classroom during those activities. And I go to each group and I make sure I give praise for things that I see and hear that show good collaboration. And then I also make sure that I redirect if I see some things that are not favorable to, good collaboration and group work. I also make it known daily during that first week that they will be working together on a regular basis, on a weekly basis, at least 2 to 3 times per week, if not more. Throughout the entire school year, they're going to be working in groups. So they should go ahead and try to be open-minded because it's not going anywhere. But again, for tips on how to seamlessly incorporate small group games into your class, I do have a post. It's called The Rules to Rule Playing Games in Small Groups. So if you're trying to create that collaborative culture and you're not quite sure how to implement it seamlessly without all of those extra classroom management issues, you definitely want to check that one out. Or if you're like, yeah, lady, that sounds great in theory that your whole class is kumbaya and working together. But what about those jokers that absolutely refuse to work in groups because they don't like people, they don't like this person or that person specifically? Whatever. How do you handle that, Missy? Well, don't worry. I got a post for you too, and it is called Collaborate or Else. So you can find both of these after you finish this podcast episode. Go ahead and scroll through and find those, and I'm sure there's something in there for you. But I want to tell you the key to creating that collaborative culture. You want to keep the focus on how to properly collaborate. That first week If the content is too challenging, meaning you're trying to have these students work on grade level material while they're still learning your procedures and expectations, a lot of your students are going to shut down in order to avoid feeling embarrassed because it's something that the content is freaking them out. Being in a new class is freaking them out. Having you as a new teacher is freaking them out. It's just a lot going on. So you have to be willing to take away some of that anxiety. Please, 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 please avoid having content that is too difficult. Make sure that you reiterate your expectations repeatedly, that you give feedback, positive feedback and redirective feedback as the kids are learning what your expectations are. Reiterate what you want to see, what you want to hear. Make sure to give the feedback and make sure you circulate in order to be able to do that. But in terms of content, I cannot stress this enough. Try using something that allows each student to share their thoughts, process each other's ideas, and start building towards a solution. So if you're going to absolutely feel like you have to use academic content, consider using items that are at least 2 grade levels below what you should be teaching those particular students. Now, for me, I tend to do things like brain teasers, puzzles, riddles, things that are just a little bit more fun that they just, it's fun for them to try to figure out while they're learning how to operate in my collaborative classroom environment. The 4th goal I have is to implement rotations or stations, however you like to call it. But my vision for this is I have a minimum of 3 different stations going on at the same time. And usually there's a digital station, a collaborative station that's more so paper-based, and a teacher-led station. Students are working on the task at their specific stations without me having to prompt them or to go to each specific station to get them started. While the students are working, they are on task, they are on topic. Groups are able to rotate to the next station in a non-chaotic manner. That's my vision in a perfect classroom. Now, how do I go from that vision into actual implementation? Well, what is taking place at each of the stations can be mixed and matched based on teacher preferences, content, so on and so forth. But what I make sure to model for my students is when they come into the classroom, they need to know that they are looking at the smart board. And from the board, they are going to find their name and they are going to move to sit and start working at the appropriate location on the appropriate assignments. When they come in, they find their name. They're like, oh, I'm supposed to be sitting at the green group. Green group is over here. Awesome. And at each station, I have instructions posted on the wall, or the task is already on the desk in the area that they're going to be working at. And I make sure that I list any supplies that they need. I let them know if it is an individual or a collaborative assignment. I let them know whether it is going to be digital based, paper based, or a combination of both. I also put the protocol for getting help. So maybe they have questions or they're confused or they need help on the problem. What is the protocol for getting help from myself or from their peers? And I also let them know on that same sheet what I will be checking as part of their grade. So I'll outline everything. It's at their station, and I try to make sure that they don't really need me for nothing. Because again, I have a teacher-led station that I'm running, so I'm not available on call. So I try to do my best to minimize that. I make sure that there is a timer displayed so that the students are aware of how much time they have remaining at that particular station. And prior to rotating to that next station, I restate the direction or the order that they're going in. I reiterate how much time they have to be seated, settled, and starting on their new station assignment. I also remind them that the transition should be quiet and that they should also be keeping their hands to themselves. Yes, I teach high schoolers, but I can guarantee you that they love to pull people's ears, ponytails, poke people, step on people's shoes. They still like to do stuff like that. So even in a high school environment, I have to say you need to quietly transition and keep your hands to yourself. All right. Now, Some teachers do like to use a transition song. Simply put, just have some way to make sure that there's an indicator for your students to know that one, it is time to transition, and that there's an indicator that the transition time is now over and that they should be settled. So, some teachers do chants, some teachers do a song, some teachers do gestures. Make it your own, but just have some indicator to hold the students accountable. And even though I may be utilizing a teacher-led station, always make sure that I create points where my group that I'm working with is working on a task. And I'd say, okay, I'm going to give you guys 3 or 4 minutes. I want you guys to work together and I want you to do this, or you're going to work by yourself for the next 3 to 4 minutes. I'm going to go check on my other groups. And when I come back, I expect to see this problem either fully done or at least partially done so I can give you some feedback, something along those lines. But just a way where I can step away from my teacher-led group and still go and check in on the other groups. Once I'm done checking on those other groups, I pop back and I check on my teacher-led group. So what is the key to implementing these rotations and stations, especially setting it up during the first week of school? Again, people, the focus should be on the process of what and how to do rotations, not so much on the content. Stop trying to give these kids grade level work the first week of school. Make the task something they can complete in the time allotted. You could have them doing origami at one station, coloring a page on this station, doing a journal entry at this station, whatever, just making sure that they understand how to get to their station, how to know what they're supposed to do at their station, go through the process of working at the station, and going through the process of transitioning to the next station. That's the focus, not so much the content. Another key to implementing these rotations and stations that first week, monitor, give praise, and redirect your students as you circulate. You have to be hands-on, y'all. Try to keep redirection general and praise specific. So if you see someone doing something wrong, make a general statement. Hey guys, remember that you're supposed to be reading your task card at your station to know what you're supposed to be doing. That's where you get your instructions. But that's general, even though there are only maybe one kid that's lost and confused of what they're supposed to be doing. Keep redirection general, but keep praise specific. Man, I want to give a shout out to the UCF group because they are all got seated on time. They're reading the task card together and they're really trying to make sure they understand what they're supposed to be doing. Great job, UCF group. Something like that. So the reason why you want to keep redirection general, but your praise specific is it allows students to self-correct themselves without feeling isolated. But then it also motivates them because now their group is like, okay, let's get it together because we want the next shout out. And just be willing to sound like a broken record. Another key to implementing something this complex is just repetition is pertinent and know that you're going to repeat yourself 101 times per period. Also, another key to implementing this is try to be as organized as possible ahead of time. Have the instructions already posted. Have the materials provided. The more organized you are, the easier it will be for your students to fall in line. When you are frantic, when you are confused, when you are chaotic, I promise you, your darling students that want you to love them so very, very much, because it's the first week and everybody wants to be liked by their new teacher, they are going to start, and I'm using quotations, y'all, they're going to start helping you by making up their own things, which we all know turns out to be the farthest thing from helpful. So keep your kids from helping you by making sure that you're organized as possible during these implementation stages. All right. Goal number 5, my last goal. Last but not least is creating a culture of growth mindset and a risk-free learning environment. So those both kind of are enmeshed. The vision I have for that is students are willing to try any question I put in front of them. They may not like making mistakes, but they understand mistakes are great learning tools. When given feedback, students are willing to make corrections and willing to reflect on their errors. They are determined and persistent to understand the process and not simply trying to get the quick answer. So that's my vision. How do I move from vision into implementation? It looks a little bit like this. The first week of school, as my students work on various styles of tasks, I always drive home a very specific idea. And that is the idea that I do not give two flying flippity flips about the right answer. My goal and my focus is not on the right answer. I only care that they tried, that they corrected, and that they reflected. I teach my students early on that I primarily care about them participating in the learning process and keeping a positive mindset. Because sidebar, if they are willing to participate fully in the learning process and are willing to keep a positive growth mindset, the learning will naturally happen anyway. But back to implementation. We discussed the growth mindset. We discussed what does that look like? What does growth mindset sound like? We also watch a couple of videos on it, and I try to soothe their anxiety about school being based on right or wrong. I try to get them comfortable with making mistakes, including making some mistakes of my own. And let me tell y'all, some of them I make on purpose to see if they're paying attention. But other times I just genuinely be messing something up. I'll be wrong. And I tell them, this one was not on purpose, y'all. I was just wrong. Good catch. And I even throw them some extra credit if they catch my mistake. If they catch my genuine mistake that I really wasn't trying to make, I give them extra credit for that. Anywho, but when talking about creating a risk-free learning environment, it best happens when I make sure that their grade on assignments and their grade in the class is primarily based on how much they engage with the learning process and how much they demonstrate a growth mindset. So part of this happens by only allowing wrong answers to count against them on a quiz or a test. And I explain that concept so much more in greater detail in my post, No Risk, Great Reward, the risk-free learning environment. So if you want to kind of dive a little bit deeper into that and get more details on what that really looks like, sounds like, and how to create that in your classroom, feel free to check that out after this episode. But the key to creating that growth mindset, that risk-free learning environment, starting with the first week, is when utilizing this type of teaching style, you cannot be flip-floppy. Okay. You have to be very consistent with that mindset on a day-to-day basis. Majority of your students' grades will need to come from their willingness to try, to correct, and to reflect. So yes, it's like more so participation points, but it's based on their participation in the learning process. And you subtract points only when they do not fully engage in that learning process or they are no longer operating in that growth mindset process. If they did not correct their paper, or if they just absolutely decided they weren't going to try in the first place, or maybe they tried once or twice, but then they gave up, they should lose points for that. Or maybe they tried and corrected their paper, but they weren't willing to reflect on the mistake they made. Well, they should lose points for that because they have to reprogram their brain. So all of that is a part of the learning process, and they get points along the way for doing the learning process fully. As I like to tell my students, they are throwing away free points when they don't fully engage in that learning process or when they refuse to stay in that growth mindset. Yes, a quiz or a test should be graded for accuracy. I mean, they are actual assessments. However, I allow everything else to be practiced. And if you do that too, then the results will blow your mind as far as getting especially low performing students or kids that hate your class, hate your subject, hate school in general. You will be surprised at how much participation you get out of those students, but you are going to have to constantly repeat your growth mindset and your learning process expectations. And I say you have to repeat that on a daily basis. Reason being is because most teachers don't operate in this fashion. So the concept is really hard for many students to trust. It's very foreign to them. And well, at least until they see that you mean what you say and say what you mean, you're gonna have to just repeat that until you've proven yourself to them and they trust it and they believe it and they fall into place with it naturally. But if you are looking for some risk-free secondary math activities, check out the Virtually Impossible Teachers Pay Teachers store for some secondary math, self-checking, self-grading, color change activities. But in conclusion, okay, your first week of school, starting with the end in mind, Most states have a 9 to 10 month school year. That is a long time to be with your students. And you have to decide how you want your school year to look. And I am pretty sure no teacher ever sets out to have a chaotic year. And I'm talking no teacher sets out to have one of those years where their students are just unruly and don't listen. The best way to prevent that is to start with the end in mind. Do not be so hell-bent on teaching grade level content the first week of school. The first week is when 99% of your students are going to be on their P's and Q's, their best behavior. They want to make a good impression and win you over. So use this time as to your advantage. Like while their brains are willing to be sponges, fill their sponges up with all the rules, all the procedures, and all the expectations for the various activities you are going to require of them throughout the school year. Use that time to model, to expect, and to redirect. I'm going to say it one more again. Use that time to model, to expect, and to redirect. When you do this early on, it sets a tone and creates cultures, okay? It creates those cultures from those visions that y'all have. It makes those visions reality. It also eliminates a lot of resistance down the line because you have been doing certain things all along from the beginning. Even if you start something out in small doses, like the rotations, you start them off the first week of school, but they don't see it again until the third week of school. At least you've already started them out with it. Just starting with the end in mind, even in small doses, they have seen it before, they have heard it before, they have experienced before, and they are less likely to resist. You are less likely to get backlash or shut down. Consistency is key. Your first week of school should be similar to your last weeks of school, and so should all the other weeks between. Please y'all, avoid starting things that you know you cannot be consistent with. It makes you less trustworthy in the eyes of your students. So remember, it is easier to create a classroom culture when it is the only culture that your students have ever known you as their teacher to have. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of Virtually Impossible Presents Lazy Learning Land Podcast. Comment below some of your goals you want for your classroom and how you plan to start them off that first week of school. If you have a goal, but you are unsure how to start setting it up, drop a comment below so our community can love on you with responses. Since there is strength in lazy, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to this podcast, my blog on virtuallyimpossible.net, no apostrophe, and our social media platforms, Pinterest and Instagram. Virtually_I'm_possible for IG and Virtually I'm Possible on Pinterest, so you can feel at home among other lazy learners. This is your girl S. signing off, and until next episode, remember to live long and lazy and never ever work too hard.